Live, local, late breaking. Channel 11 News starts with breaking news.
Good afternoon, everyone. We begin with breaking news on former Pittsburgh Police Chief Nate Harper. We have just learned in just the last couple minutes that he has been sentenced. Prosecutors wanted jail time, saying he created an unauthorized slush fund, but the defense had argued for probation.
That's right, and Channel 11's Rick Earl has been following this story since before the former chief was indicted. He joins us live at the federal courthouse. Rick, jail time.
Yes, that's right, Joe. The judge just handed down the sentence. Nate Harper now will spend 18 months in a federal prison. Of course, his attorneys were hoping to avoid that. They wanted community service or in-house electronic monitoring. And this morning they presented a host of witnesses. There were 10 witnesses in all, character witnesses testifying on behalf of the chief, saying what a good man he is, how good he's done for the community. But that did not persuade the judge. Again, she just sentenced him to 18 months in federal prison. The guidelines called for 18 to 24 months, so it is on the lower end of that spectrum. Of course, we have some video that we shot of Nate Harper arriving here earlier this morning. He had no comment as he walked in with his wife and his daughter here to learn his sentence, which again is 18 months in federal prison. Now, coming up in a short time, we expect to hear from the U.S. Attorney. He has called a news conference for 2 o'clock, so we expect to learn much more from him. We can also tell you during this hearing that Nate Harper himself spoke out. It was an emotional speech that he gave the court here. He spoke for about 5 minutes. He said, quote, "I made a mistake. It's been devastating. It's tarnished the law enforcement community, my family, my wife, my children. I am a broken man. I can't tell you why I made that mistake. It was a lapse in judgment." Again, Nate Harper spoke for about 5 minutes, attempting to persuade the judge to give him house arrest or community service. But again, the judge here making an example of Nate Harper and giving him 18 months in federal prison. Of course, he pled guilty back in October to stealing city funds, diverting city funds to a slush fund account, and then using those city funds for his own personal gain. Nate Harper did that and pleaded guilty back in October, and again just sentenced here minutes ago. Now, my colleague Alan Jennings is up in the courtroom right now getting the final details of this sentence, and we expect to hear from Nate Harper's attorneys, Bob Del Greco and Bob Light, when they leave the courthouse, and then later on we will of course hear from U.S. Attorney David Hickton. But that is the very latest here at the federal courthouse downtown. Again, the sentence calls for 18 months in a federal prison for former police chief Nate Harper. Back to you guys.
All right, so jail time for Nate Harper. As Rick said, the judge making an example of him. We have a team of reporters staying on top of this very big story. You can look for continuing coverage and reaction to the sentence tonight at 5 here on Channel 11 News, and of course anytime online at WPXI.com.
Here is Bob Light coming out of the federal courthouse right now. He is Nate Harper's attorney. He is followed by Bob Del Greco. Mr. Light, can we get your reaction to the sentence of 18 months for Nate Harper?
Oh, we're extremely disappointed in the sentence. We believe that the court had ample reason to consider leniency on behalf of Mr. Harper. Again, we're extremely disappointed, but as the judge said, he violated public trust, and that's what she's depending on.
Mr. Harper, can we get your reaction? Mr. Harper, what do you have to say about 18 months in federal prison? Can you tell us anything, Mr. Harper? Do you have anything? What do you say to the taxpayers?
Get out of his way.
Bob, can you tell us anything?
No, get out of his way.
I would be more than glad to talk to you if you'd let me usher my client to his car.
Okay, Nate Harper is now being led to his car by his attorneys. Again, he was just given 18 months in federal prison.
Go ahead, Nate.
Mr. Harper, do you have anything to say to us? Bob, what can you tell us?
Well,
what is his mood right now?
well, he's despondent, as I indicated. Nate, where are you going?
Is he?
John, over here.
Mr. Harper's getting back out of the truck. All right, we're just going to roll with this right now. Mr. Harper is back down here with his wife, we believe. This is Cynthia Harper. She's a former police officer as well.
Excuse me.
Nate, do you have anything? Do you have anything to add?
Excuse me. Excuse me.
That is Nate Harper with his wife getting into his sport utility vehicle there. His attorneys are behind him. We will hear from them in just a minute. All right, Bobby, what can you tell us about this? He's obviously very upset about this.
He's very despondent, crestfallen. This is as I indicated in my closing remarks, it has been a meteoric fall for him. He suffered colossal collateral consequences. He's lost his job, he's lost his pension, he's been the subject of public derision, and now he's been sentenced to jail. So it was not a good day for the former city Pittsburgh police officer, a public servant for 26 years, and a good guy.
Well, you wanted witness
her decision.
I have to tell you, the federal guidelines are even though they're advisory, are followed quite often. I'm very disappointed. I subjectively felt that we had presented compelling evidence to allow someone to consider the variance from the guidelines. Obviously, she considered the seriousness of the offense and its deterrent effect to be more weighty than the fact that what we have is a 61-year-old broken man who has dedicated the majority of his life in a very positive way to the citizens of Pittsburgh. So it's always disappointing to have a client go to jail, and it's really disappointing to have a client of Nate Harper's quality and character and compassion and public service be sentenced to incarceration.
Was he prepared for this sentence, though?
Yes, we've met with Nate on a number of occasions. The guidelines were clear. It's not as if we didn't know what the guidelines would be. We knew that was the range. I think we argued vigorously, subjectively, I thought compellingly, for a deviation, a departure, a variance from those guidelines, but such was not the case.
Yeah, the other thing is, Bob, you had witness after witness get up there and talk about the character of this man and the good he has done for this community. You even had a prosecutor here in this case saying, if I wasn't standing here, I might write a letter on his behalf.
I think undeniably he is a man of compassion and caring, and as I indicated, a great husband, a doting father, a supporting grandchild, and a community activist, in that he attempted to empower people who weren't empowered. I think everyone in that courtroom, including the judge and prosecutor, would concede that Nate Harper is a real good guy. The question is whether or not this momentary lapse of judgment outweighed that, and to some extent the court believed that the guidelines were correct and imposed the guideline figure as opposed to a variance.
In the federal system, what's the minimum?
Being more than a lapse, you pointed to the ongoing use of the funds.
That's a good point. The crime wasn't a one-instance matter, and I think that weighed heavily in her consideration. When I say momentary lapse, I take a 61-year-old guy who dedicated 59 and a half or 60 years to good, solid, honest, compassionate public service. And we kind of weigh that against. I know former superintendent, former United States Marshal, chiefs of police have all indicated a momentary lapse of judgment, indicating in the wide temporal spectrum, so to speak, this was a small point of Nate Harper's life, and one that regrettably will define him and has put him in a situation where he's going to suffer incarceration.
Bob, do you have any idea when he'll go or where he will go?
I do. The when is probably within 4 to 8 weeks. The where, in all probability, will be minimum security, and I would suspect that some policy would put him in a situation where there's protective custody, because as former Commander Friedman indicated, former chiefs of police and cops aren't generally well received in the general population of prisons.
Are you concerned for his safety?
I do, and I hope that my concern is shared by the Bureau of Prisons and those who know this area better than me.
Bob, is this investigation over? Do you have any knowledge that it's still ongoing in terms
I actually have no knowledge whatsoever as to whether or not this concludes matters relative to this, or whether or not I think the last that I heard was that I guess United States Attorney Hickton indicated that an investigation was ongoing. I don't suspect it's anything regarding my client, and as I've indicated before, I'm not in a position to speculate as to who or what the result will be.
Have they talked to him anymore? Investigators talked to him anymore about other matters?
No, our interviews have concluded.
Minimum time in federal system, does he have to serve all 18?
After a year, they have a good time. He'll get credit for 53 days, assuming that he's a model inmate, and I expect that that would be the case. At some point, he may be eligible for a step down to a halfway house.
Thank you.
Thank you. There you have it. Attorney for Nate Harper, Bob Del Greco. Again, former police chief Nate Harper receiving 18 months in a federal prison. That sentence just handed down by a federal judge here. I'll send it back to you guys now.
Yeah, Rick, while we still have you there, you have actually approached Nate Harper, and he obviously didn't have anything to say to you, but you brought up the taxpayers. And one thing we want to know or get clear is there some money that Nate Harper is now going to have to pay back in the thousands?
Yeah, that's included in this whole process. It was $31,866.90 to be exact, I believe, and Nate Harper will indeed have to repay that money back. That was brought up here in court, so the taxpayers will recoup that.
And Rick, we saw Nate Harper come out. He looked so stricken. He really did. He got into a car, then got out again. Was that to escort his wife, Christina? And then one other question, it sounded like someone was sobbing. Was that she?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Nate Harper came out right behind his two attorneys and got into the vehicle. There were a number of people pushing to get him into the vehicle, and then I believe they just neglected his wife, and that was Cynthia Harper, his wife, who was back there still in the federal courthouse. And Nate Harper was sitting in the van and saw his wife there, and he got out of the van and then ran back to her, and she was indeed she was breaking down and crying as she was led out by Nate Harper. But that was his wife, Cynthia Harper, and she too testified here today on his behalf, calling him a great father. And as you'll recall, Peggy and Joe, she was a Pittsburgh police officer herself for about 20 years. So it was a very emotional scene here because I think really they expected to get community service or some type of house arrest. I don't think they really expected that the judge would send Nate Harper to prison. But again, the judge saying that she is making an example of him, and she said at the end there during the hearing that a slap on the wrist would be inappropriate in this case.
Yeah, Rick, a lot of us were basically suspecting probation. Let's just get people caught up real quick while we still have Rick out there. Nate Harper, once again, sentenced to 18 months in a federal prison. And I want to get the timeline straight. You were talking to his attorney, and the timeline, Rick, seemed to be within 4 to 8 weeks. It looks like he'll have to report to a minimum security facility.
That's exactly right. We don't know where that will be, and we don't exactly know when yet that will be, but it looks like about a month and a half, Nate Harper will be required to report to a minimum security facility in the federal prison system. So they'll give him time to get basically his affairs in order, and then he'll have to report to that federal prison. But we should learn much more about that, Joe. We understand the U.S. Attorney has now scheduled a news conference for 2 o'clock this afternoon, so hopefully we will learn more about where Nate Harper will be serving his time, more of the details and intricacies of this case, and as well as this ongoing investigation that the U.S. Attorney said to me when I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago. He said, Rick, all I can tell you is this investigation is indeed ongoing, and that's the wider probe into the city of Pittsburgh. So hopefully at 2 o'clock today we'll learn much more about that as well.
It's very interesting, Rick, that Attorney Del Greco brought up that point that someone in a position like the former police chief may have a difficult time with the general prison population, and they may need to take some steps to keep him safe there.
Yeah, that was a point, too, made by former Pittsburgh Police Commander Ron Freeman. You'll recall him. He was the lead detective on many homicide cases in the city, and he was here in the courtroom today. He did not speak on behalf of Nate Harper, but he wrote a letter on behalf of Mr. Harper, and that's one point he brought up in that letter, saying that, hey, look, when you get a former police officer who goes to a federal prison, anything can happen. I'm more concerned about his safety if you send him away to a federal prison. So that was a big issue raised here in this court hearing. But again, the judge saying that she was not going to give him a slap on the wrist and decided that he deserved 18 months in prison. And again, the guidelines here called for about 18 to 24 months in jail for the crimes he committed, that theft of city funds, and also for failing to file his tax return for 4 consecutive years.
Rick Earl, thanks for the latest down there. Obviously, you gathered a lot of information in a short period of time. We're going to break it all down, of course, and have more at 5 coming up later on the show there. Thank you, Rick. And we do have a statement just released from the mayor's office.
Yes, the mayor, Mayor Peduto, says this is a sad day for our city, but a chance for rebirth within our police bureau. With the community's support, I am committed to breaking with the past, championing ethics and accountability from top to bottom, rebuilding a department that all city residents, including rank and file officers, can be proud of.
We should also mention that this is still an ongoing investigation. The Attorney General mentioned, Nate Harper's involvement is now being closed.
It's just one facet of this, yes,
much
larger investigation, which we continue to cover for you. We're going to be back with more after this break. Stay with us.